In part, this is a science film. In part, this is a proposal from me to you for dramatically changing the world. Mostly, this is all extremely interesting. It explains truly life-changing breakthroughs in physics, and a special topic that deals with water, droughts, famine, and the planet's environment. Altogether, this film covers three main topics: the solution to the question, what is time?, the grand unification of physics, and the solution to fusion energy. In my opinion, directly and indirectly, this new physics is going to dramatically change your life. Keep in mind, the vast majority of moisture in the atmosphere comes from the oceans. The sun evaporates the water from the surface of the oceans. This is a form of solar energy. There is no way anybody could ever build a solar evaporator as big as this natural system. The moisture that evaporates into the atmosphere over the oceans is then transported over continents naturally. There is no way anybody could ever build a pipeline as big as the atmosphere. Ponder this. People have fought and killed each other over water throughout history. Try doing an internet search on water wars and you might be shocked. No longer. There's no way anybody can hog all the water in the atmosphere. You can't fence it off, you can't dam it up. Nature is constantly replenishing it. In warm climates, everybody has access to it. The amount of water in the atmosphere is so large, we simply could not even begin to harvest a significant percentage of it. So, the water is naturally evaporated from the ocean, in essence distilled by the sun, and is naturally transported by the atmosphere. Massive quantities of toxic salt or salt water brine does not need to be disposed of. In my opinion, if these water collection devices are powered by fusion, then no man-made desalination plant will ever be able to economically compete with this process. What these devices do is to simply take over just the part of the water cycle performed by the cold fronts and the clouds, the condensation portion of the job. Now, we need a name for these machines. Unfortunately, the name I came up with is kind of boring. In my opinion, it is too technical. It needs to be more emotional. If you can think of a better name, then please let me know. There are companies that already build smaller machines like these called atmospheric water generators. We already have much smaller machines like this in our homes called dehumidifiers. The machines I'm describing work on the same principle. Just cool the air, but they are much larger. They are in a class of their own. In essence, they define a new class of atmospheric water generators. As such, they need their own name. Now, when lush lands are transformed into deserts, the process is called desertification. In general, this is bad. The opposite process is called oasification. In general, this is good. Therefore, I call these devices desert oasification atmospheric water generators, or DOAGs for short. The acronym always reminds me of dogs. I often look at my dog and say, "Nice dog." I don't think he gets the joke. You've got to admit it, this is a great idea. If we have fusion-powered dogs, we could transform sterile desert regions into lush grasslands, farmlands, savannas, forests, and maybe even someday rainforests. Let me summarize. So far, I've just briefly described the machine for you. Next, I need to describe how we might use these machines to change the world. Now, I understand what I'm about to describe is a very large experiment. It amounts to medium scale or even large scale manipulation of the environment. That almost sounds bad. It's not. Before being used overseas, I would test and optimize these devices here in the United States. I would probably do the first small scale test here in Minnesota and then perform the first medium scale test in a location like in the panhandle of Texas or maybe down in Oklahoma or somewhere around there. If I personally do this large scale experiment, which is my desire, it would be dependent upon me making enough money from fusion to fund the experiment. I really want to do this. I want to see how it works out. If I ever become wealthy enough from my fusion energy patent, I have such a strong desire to do this, I would be willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this experiment. Now ponder this cost-wise. The pipes are no big deal. Diffusion power plants are going to be the expensive part of this plan. Because there is always the potential for human problems, I would prefer doing this experiment using the third class of fusion power plants, the kind that could be flown into or out of a remote region in the back of a large transport plane. If political problems crop up, or if some kind of armed conflict crops up, and if these expensive fusion power plants are put at any risk, then they would simply be flown out of their locations. This experiment would affect a number of nations. Therefore, the experiment would need their consent. My favorite location for the first large-scale overseas experiment is so dry, literally nobody lives there. Only small numbers of people live within hundreds of miles of the proposed location. In this large-scale experiment, I would like to begin by completely greening an area of desert of about 120 to 160 square miles in size, represented here by the darker inner green circle in this graphic. The location is northwest of Lake Chad in Africa. The country is Niger. The location is about 300 miles to the south-southwest of Bilma. That is why I talked about Bilma earlier. Bilma is the closest town to this location. This location is a great choice for many reasons. The top 5 reasons are, first, it is extremely dry, yet there is massive amounts of moisture in the atmosphere. Second, it is a region where the climate has been gradually getting worse, yet it is a region where it might be relatively easy to flip the climate. With human influence, the local climate could gradually improve. If the climate in this region can be changed for the better, it would be great for many reasons. Third, if this experiment works, it can be expanded in a way that will grow huge swaths of green clear across the Sahara Desert. Fourth, the area is poor. It has no water. On Earth, the first prerequisite is having water. The experiment will help the local economy, first with jobs and over the long run by transforming the desert from brown to green. Fifth, but not finally, if successful, this experiment will create vast areas for African animals to live. Literally, eventually, hundreds of thousands of square miles of desert could be greened. At present, this area is so dry, its rainy season on average lasts only 1 day per year. While this area is extremely dry, keep in mind at any given time there's always millions of tons of water in the overhead atmosphere. Normally, this is an unusable ocean of water and it is simply floating on by like an invisible cloud. This Google Map image is a recent satellite view of the area northwest of Lake Chad. You can see there is a dried up river that once flowed from this mountain range, the Termit Mountains, to Lake Chad. Apparently, this vanished river was once called the Delia. I would start by building a number of fusion-powered dogs to the northwest of the lake with an initial goal of producing about 1 billion gallons of water a year. The goal is to totally green the inner circle, and if possible, partially green the outer circle. The goal of the experiment is not to directly refill Lake Chad. The main goal is to see if the greening of this area will help bring back the rains to the region, especially to these mountains. In essence, the strategy is to lure the rains back to the Termit Mountains. It is fairly obvious how this region's microclimate once worked. At one point in history, when storm clouds flowed up the western flank of these mountains, the cooling effect would condense moisture out of the clouds in the form of rain. Here, at the base of the Termit Mountains, the rains would collect as they drained down this western flank. Numerous small tributaries fed this large dried up river, the Delia River, and its waters flowed into Lake Chad. The Delia River intrigues me. I wish I knew when it last flowed. I wonder, has it had any flash floods in recent years? Keep in mind, what I just explained is a local microclimate. In the long run, it is more important to understand the larger region's climate. The strategy here is to create a large area in this part of the desert that is cooler, wetter, and greener. The plan is complex. I wish I had the time to go over all the background information. I wish I had the time to go over all of the details. When I originally designed this portion of the movie, I had tons of information that I deleted. Actually, I deleted significant amounts of information 2 separate times. This interesting story pulls you in. It makes you want to study how the Earth's climate varies over time, how the Earth's climate has cycles,